Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it is and who it ain't. Black heart, black mind, black end. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So let me go ahead and let me tell you first that in the beginning you may not understand what I'm saying and what it has to do with the title, but if you bear with me, I'll tie it together. Now, on the flip side, let me explain this too. Some of you that have listened to me before know exactly how it ties in, and you will understand even before I tie it in. I'm going to start by saying this, though. In the beginning, we weren't dysfunctional. Of course, we had to be kidnapped, overworked, exhausted, separated from family, traumatized repeatedly in order to become as dysfunctional as we are. And some of that dysfunction became more widespread in recent decades. It had always been there, but it was more widespread in recent decades because apparently our enemies looked at our dysfunction and said, well, the negative stereotypes aren't true enough. Let's see what else would work. And they kept on until they found something that would induce us to make the negative stereotypes even more true. And they found some things. We've already talked about that. That's what this whole black red pill space is about. The black manosphere is pretty much about that. But there are those of us who actually look at the dysfunction and we associate the dysfunction with our phenotype, with our blackness. That does happen. I know of one guy on Facebook. I was in a group with him, and he was, I forgot his name, but he was vehemently against even the validation of dark-skinned women. Like you don't express a preference for them in this group. You don't post pictures of them that flatter them. Dark-skinned women, they're not to be sexually validated, period. They can't be feminine enough. And I was like, where does this jigaboo get this hatred from? And later on, I began to not care where he got it from. It's white supremacist. It's not, dark skin in a woman is not a deformity like this dude was acting. I don't care what his reasons were. I'm not accepting any excuse because, as you all know, you do not exonerate white supremacists in front of us. You don't even normalize white supremacists. As a matter of fact, you don't normalize Western white civilization in front of me. I'm telling you they're subhuman, rat bastards, inferiors because of the lengths to which they're willing to go. And I'm not talking about every individual. I'm talking about a civilization. You do not normalize him in front of me because of the hatred they practice. Eastern Europeans have had to suffer because of them. How you going to sit up and tell me that they're okay? No, individuals of them are okay. Their systems are not. Their systems, that's part of what Israel is. Israel is an extension of their system. And you see what Israel will do. All of their nations in their diaspora get started the same way, oppressing the people that were already there. That's how Australia got started. That's how New Zealand became the nation it is today. Don't get me started on the United States. You already know. Same with Canada. They ain't off the hook either. So in any case, South Africa, oh God, Lord have mercy. Anywhere where they're in power, they oppress, and where they are the majority, they committed genocide. End of story. So Israel's just the new kid on the block from the same forming, or rather expanding the same diaspora. That's all that is. But in any case, there are those of us who actually look and we internalize the self-hatred. So we look at our dysfunction and we think that the dysfunction comes from the wide nose and the thick lips and the high melanin count and the 4C hair. And we really believe that. It's not common. It does exist though. I'm willing to bet money that I'm not allowed to gamble as a Muslim, but I'm pretty sure because I witnessed myself that it's actually more common amongst sisters than it is amongst brothers. But there are a few brothers that actually do have that. And so even though SYSBM and Passport brothers are not designed or intended to be about black men that just want to breed blackness out, there are those who could use that as a cover. I admit that. And the Reverend Brother Pastor Deacon Dr. Edward Allen Anderson pointed this out. Shout out to him. Now, some of you may wonder why how does that tie into what I'm talking about? Well, on the flip side, let me be honest with y'all. I've looked into this thing, and what I found is that even what I said last year, which is that colorism internationally tends to follow one direction, a universal preference for the paler over the darker. Within the United States, we have fought that. We've been, as much as we've fallen victim to that mindset and internalized it, we have also resisted that. We've probably been the best about resisting that. And now when you see other groups of black folks in other countries beginning to resist that, that's something they got from us. But what I've seen is what I said earlier, and that is that you in the United States, it really does not do justice to associate the admixed, ambiguous-looking phenotype with selling out or with weakness. It does not work. It doesn't hold water. The closest I could find to that was one man who didn't even stay on that track. W.B. Du Bois did have some of that at one point, I believe. He and Marcus Garvey went at each other, and it's hard to tell how much of this was genuine and how much of this was just them going at each other and retaliating. But see, let's be honest. A lot of people have not. There's one thing to call Kwame out for, and that is when he goes in on Matt Barnes and DJ Envy, he never, ever leaves their phenotype alone, which is what they don't control, even though what they've said about him was always about his game. Though it was not correct, that's what they've said. And the fact is that Kwame Brown's defense of himself is solid enough without him going in on their phenotypes, but every time he goes in on them, he does. And I don't care about him going in on Skip's looks and how he looks like Dracula, because that's him going in on someone from the Mayonnaise Mafia. Not that I think that Skip is necessarily a racist. I don't think that he's one of them. To my knowledge, I don't follow him that much, but I don't recall anything racist that he said yet. I was never told about anything, actually. There's nothing to recall. I was never told. So if one of you comes in the comments and says, here's a link, Skip Bayless said this about black people, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, first time I'm hearing about it. I didn't hear it and forget. I just didn't know. I never knew till now. But that's something else. I'm not going to go in on that. Go on ahead. Dig into them. But that does not extend to lighter skin or ambiguous looking black folks. We're not the problem, and we never were. Not in America. And as a matter of fact, the only time that I was able to find out about the so-called mulatto being an actual problem to black people was in Haiti. And they got the issue for it. And then later on, the funny thing was that later on, because of their proximity to the French, they got the issue. Later, though, the unmixed Africans of Haiti began to join with the French against the mulattoes in another rebellion called the Orge Rebellion. So it seems to have canceled itself out, and the only group that really never completely lost were the French. Even when they lost the colony, they still got paid reparations all the way up until recent decades. They never really, really lost. If you were Haitian, mulatto, or unmixed African, or any other admixture, you wound up losing. Because look at the state in which you find Haiti now. So that's another topic. And of course, we know about Brazil, and if you were admixed, then you were considered better, and everybody wanted to be, and you had all these categories so that people would not have to call themselves black. But now that's changing in Brazil. I mean, we all know that. People are going into Brazil. Some of the passport brothers that go to Brazil, whether it's to pay for play or actually with girlfriends or wives, they have seen that there have been many Brazilians, male and female, that will tell you proudly they are black, even though previously they would have been put into some other category. People are proud to be black in Brazil, and if they have a choice, they will claim it. That's us. That's something that we black Americans started, and they rightfully took it on, and I'm proud of them for it. But what we're doing is we're sitting up here and we're trying to associate this phenotype with selling out and disloyalty. And even though W.E.B. Du Bois and Garvey went at each other in the United States, the fact remains that Garvey wound up being sold out by people in his own organization. Du Bois tried to work with them to take him down, but the actual success came from someone within Garvey's organization that turned against him. Garvey, as we know, was imprisoned, then deported back to Jamaica. He never made it back to the continent. However, W.E.B. Du Bois, he got militant. He said, you know what? These mayonnaise mafiosos are never going to treat us equally and fairly. And he got on a plane and went to Ghana and lived and died in Ghana, where he's still buried to this day. So he realized his former foe's dream, and they even reconciled in between those two times. So that being said, this really not substance to, in the United States, people of the admixed phenotype being some sort of threat. But a lot of us associate treachery with that. Now, we are right to support Kwame Brown and his reaction. I do. Minus what I've said about him going in on a phenotype. We're right to support that because he was dissed unfairly for 2 decades. That's true. And he's a victim of black people internalizing that John Henryism, about which Professor Dr. T. Hassan Johnson has spoken eloquently and pointed out. We internalize that whole John Henryism, that black Superman complex. We just gonna alpha our way through the pains and the injuries that are caused by normal human limitations, burdened by extraordinary burdens. We little boys trying to figure out how we gonna be the man for our mamas. That ain't our job. But that's what when we come up rough and harsh like that, that's what we start thinking. We little boys trying to figure out how we gonna be grown men, and that ain't our job when we that age. Financially or physically or any other way. And that's exactly the burden that many of us internalize. And I ain't gonna front, a lot of our female relatives don't help with that either. They really don't. My own son was about to be a victim of that. I had to teach him how to duck and dodge that particular bullet. And I'm going to say, on a side note, I want to say this right quick. And I'm talking to not only some of the old heads 20 years ago, but I'm talking even to some of the old heads just a decade ago. Within even the Muslim community, you also were guilty of this. You internalize it, and then you try to preach it to the younger men who were in their 20s and 30s at that time that are now in the 30s and 40s at this point in time. And you would brag about working 2 and 3 jobs to take care of your family. And you were heroic for doing it. But what you fail to understand is that you should not have had to do it, and we shouldn't either. And so if we look at the pay and say it's not even going to justify working 2 and 3 jobs anymore, we ain't doing that. You fuck to shuck up and understand that our math was simply better than yours. And I'm talking even in the Muslim community, because y'all are some of the main ones talking about a man's job is, yeah, I know. Well, your man's also supposed to be paid when he does his job. And what you're saying is, young buck, you're lazy, get out there and work hard and come home with nothing in exchange for it. Man, what you brothers didn't seem to realize is that your wives were talking bad about you if you were home. So miss me with that. Because I heard some of y'all talking that even back in the 2000s and 2010s. But that's another topic. That's that whole internalization of John Henryism. And so Kwame Brown was victimized by others who had internalized that John Henryism. So when Kwame Brown needed some work done on certain joints, Kobe still said to him, hey man, keep me open, keep me open. And he did, and that's when Kobe did it as well as he did in his performance. I learned that from this interview with Tommy Sotomayor, to which I'm still listening. But let me point this out, though. I'm not knocking him standing up for himself. No, he should. What I'm about to say next is to knock us, black Americans as a whole, for one thing that has not even happened yet. I'm about to drag us for a hypothetical situation because you know further mucking well that what I'm about to say is true. It's just not true for every individual amongst us. But we know that a collective and majority reaction would have been exactly as I've said. And some of you already know what I'm about to say. If you reversed the appearance of Kwame Brown with that of DJ Envy and or Matt Barnes, and everything else was still the same, they drug him for 20 years, and then he finally starts talking back the exact same way that he has, many of us, there at least would have been a debate in the black community. at very least. But many of us would not have supported Mr. Brown. We would not have considered him right for standing up for himself. We would have said, oh, he weak and he couldn't take it because he light-skinned it. And this was brought to my attention by myself. This was, well, I thought about it actually, but I did think about this, but I just said, well, it's a hypothetical, and then I'm probably just being too sensitive about it myself. I consider that because I've internalized that. But it was a Trinidadian brother, non-ADOS, that brought this to my attention. That had Kwame Brown looked like Matt Barnes and he was defending himself like this, pretty much the same way, he would not have been considered manly and masculine and taken up for black manhood and all that. He would not have been. Sergeant Willie Pete was right about one thing. There are certain appearances a black man cannot have and simultaneously be considered representation of black masculinity. It can't happen, even when he behaviorally represents it. We got every right to be ticked off about that. Now, some of you live in other parts of the United States in which colorism takes on a different direction or severity, and you may disagree because of that, because in your region of the country, that's not true. And if that's the case, I understand your disagreement. But just let me remind you that I've already conceded the point that colorism, even in the United States, is not identical from one region to another. There is a national trend, an overarching trend, but when you break it down by region, it's not really that way. It's like the relationship between African Americans and Latin Americans. It's not the exact same in every region of the United States. You go to prison in California, you do not get buddy-buddy with a Latin American if you black. And they got black Latinos, but I don't know where they fall into this. I really don't. Anyway, you just don't. I mean, you could have, gang wars in prison about that. Both of them lead the white gangs alone, go at each other. But then you go into the Northeast coast and it's not quite so bad like that. So in the prisons or outside. So I understand that just like that changes from region to region, so too does our internalized colorism change from region to region. It's very true. I mean, even in the middle 90s, when I was in Atlanta starting college, there was the one attractive woman that openly showed being attracted to me in exchange was from New Jersey. And so I look back on it and I think, okay, you know what? I actually heard that it wasn't quite that bad out there. That New York, on one hand, was that they were kind of on that new stuff, whereas in New Jersey, not quite so much. That's what I had been told. But I was told that after the time that she and I spent together. Now, I ain't gonna front. As I told y'all, I lived in the Southeast, though, unfortunately. And I told y'all what it was in the Southeast. And I was hearing about it becoming this way even in other parts. I mean, there was one of the guys from Bone, I forgot what his name was, but in one song he said, "Don't let the light skin fool you, I'll uck you fup." So even where he was in the Midwest, where apparently you would not be curbed by different sisters for that, there was still the stereotype that you just ain't strong, you ain't thug, you ain't gangster. I knew a cat from Detroit, Michigan. That's my slang term for Detroit. But anyway, I remember him saying that certain people just got this impression you can't be tough. But he didn't say that women mistreated him. Well, when in the Southeast, you would be assumed to be all kind of PU 55Ys, and sisters would be hard on you. I told y'all about that. So I understand that you may have a different take on it based on the region in which you live, and that's fine. But if you hear what I'm saying and it's not based on a region and you just don't want to agree with me, yeah, I'm going to take issue with you. Because in that case, it's like, okay, you've seen this happen to a certain extent before, but when I say it, I vocalize it, you don't want to believe it. And that's why I look at somebody sideways like, okay, now see, don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that mess if it's not different based on your region. But the fact remains, yes, I'm dragging us collectively through the mud for a hypothetical situation. Because until the day that it really is not true, that I will be considered, I'd be known to be insane for saying it, we ain't out the woods yet psychologically. He is right to stand up for himself. But our reaction to it is, our favorable reaction to it, though correct, still would not be there if you simply swap out and exchange the appearances. And most of us in many regions of the United States know full further muck and well that what I just said is true. So that being said, and I know because see, when I've gone in on some people that actually have caused me to lose my cool, like top cats. I call them top porch monkeys. Somebody said, see, that was colorist. How was that colorist? I didn't say nothing about his shade. I didn't know what he looked like, actually. I found that out later on. But because I had already said what I looked like, somebody decided to jump in and say that I was colorist. Like, and when I finally saw what he looked like, he was in the middle of the spectrum. But you see, the point I'm making is that by me going in and stepping up and taking up for myself, even though him swearing at me was a case of mistaken identity, by me going and doing that, I'm a colorist. Nothing, the same commentator didn't have a furthermucking thing to say about him not even paying attention to the difference between my voice and the voice of an actual Caucasian man named Of Land, Sea, and Air that was in a debate with him. He didn't even listen long enough to notice that it was two different people. Nothing was said about that. He was going in on me when I simply said, I've been waiting, but I got to run and catch this bus. And he just lit into me, and I hadn't said nothing else before that. And I ain't gonna front. This is one thing about which I do believe it is okay to be violent. When you were singled out, I think it's okay to get violent in a case like that. Kwame Brown was singled out for a lot of things. And if he had decided to just show up one morning at the Breakfast Club's radio station and I wouldn't say necessarily knock out Charlemagne the God. I wouldn't say to knock him out per se. But if he decided to do that, well, at least I would have understood why he was that angry. I don't remember what DJ Envy said about Kwame Brown to warrant his attack. But if he said something, which he must have, because Kwame's not going in on people that don't talk bad about him, I would understand why he slugged him. I would understand why he walked up on Gilbert and Matt Barnes and Stephen A. Jackson and slugged them, especially Stephen A. Jackson, because Stephen A. Jackson is a Muslim, and so he knows the rules on backbiting. May not apply to non-Muslims, but the fact is that we just generally understand that there's no reason to backbite somebody that ain't said or done nothing to you or against you. We don't go starting conflicts, so I would have understood. If he had taken folks that singled him out, walked up to them, and punched them in their mouth. Now, if they were like this with everybody, maybe not. But if he had gotten violent with them for real, for singling him out, and they actually singled him out, I'd have had nothing to say about it. Because when we black folks single somebody out, we tend to do it for stuff that is beyond their control. We are vicious with each other. We are so vicious with each other that, frankly, if I'm just going to be honest about it, I actually would understand why some of us might just get assassinated by each other. But by that same token, I can't sit up here and say that it's okay to respond with violence when we single each other out and then turn around and let somebody else that's not us off the hook when they single us out. I wouldn't say that. No, it's if somebody of another race is going to single us out for mistreatment, I don't really have a moral objection to singling them out for violence. Legally speaking, you're going to get in trouble. I'm not saying to go and do it. I'm just saying that I'm not going to morally object to it. Just to be consistent and point that out. But we got to stop this mess. Stop singling each other out for things that we do not control. Because as much as I've sat up and said I disagree with him going in on Matt Barnes and DJ Envy about that phenotype, the fact is Kwame was still singled out by not just the NBA, but by Black America in general for what he did not control when he was born, how much he had to go through to get where he got, and the injuries that he received. And the culture into which he was born and into which he walked in when he joined the NBA. These were all beyond his control, and he got singled out despite this. because of these things. And that's on us. Just like it's on us, the fact that we are now rightfully applauding him, but we would not have done so if you simply swapped his appearance with Barnes or DJ Envy's. We would not be, and don't lie about it. Some of you come from regions in which that's not the case, or some of you may even come from a generation in which that's not the case. But others of you have come up and you actually know, because you saw this happen in lesser situations or different situations. And so some of you come up from the generations for which, or in the regions in which what I'm saying is true, and you know it's true, and you just want to disagree because you don't want to admit that. Because you don't want to admit that you actually may play a role in our internal divisions. I think I've said enough. Thank you for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.